Wamanjika, welcome friends to part 51 of our series on Mark's Gospel as we follow Jesus on the road with his disciples. My name is Stephen Barro from the Melbourne chapter of God Squad, and I'm coming to you today from Wurundjeri country in Melbourne, Australia. Today's reading is from Mark chapter 11, verses 27 to 33, where the chief priests, scribes and elders confront Jesus, demanding to know by what authority he acts. The context is that we're in Passion Week, as it's traditionally called throughout the church world today. And Mark devotes 30% of his gospel writings, to the events of this week, so we know it's important stuff. Over the last few weeks in our series, we've seen that Jesus and his disciples have entered Jerusalem as we celebrate on Palm Sunday. He's overturned the money changers' temples, he's cursed the fig tree, and each night it seems him and his disciples stay outside the city gates. So today's reading starts with Jesus, the day after he's overturned the tables, returning once again to the scene of the crime and wandering around the outer courts of the temple. I can only imagine what other people would have said. The news would have spread, and I'm sure that many people thought that he would not dare to show his face back there again after what he'd done the day before. But he did show up. And we are told that the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders representing the Sanhedrin, the highest ruling body in Judea, came to question him. These are the ones he'd been arguing with right throughout his life, and ultimately the ones who set him up with the Romans and had him put to death. I can also imagine that there would have been quite a crowd around, and it must have been pretty intimidating for Jesus and his disciples, because many would have been pretty angry with him, what he had done the day before. And many would have been pretty keen for the religious leaders to do something about this rebel who caused much loss. So in verse 28 we read, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law say to him, "By what authority are you doing these things? And who gave you the authority to do this?" And I love Jesus' response here. Verses 29 and 30, Jesus replied, "I will ask you one question. Answer me, and I will tell you by what authority I'm doing these things. John's baptism, was it from heaven or human origin? Tell me." His response, a question about John the Baptist's authority, leaves them trapped, unwilling to admit the truth or risk losing their control. Because they could not eulogize the murdered prophet, John the Baptist, because they publicly had opposed him and no doubt consented to his imprisonment. Neither could they denounce him, because since his martyrdom, he'd become more and more popular, as we see in the passage. In verse 31 it says, "They discussed it amongst themselves, the teachers of the law. And if we say from heaven, he will ask, then why didn't you believe him? But if we say of human origin, then the whole crowd will be against us." So they answered Jesus, "We don't know." So Jesus said, "Neither will I tell you by what authority I'm doing these things." I love this from Jesus. This exchange is a masterclass in subversion. Jesus doesn't play their games. Instead, he exposes their fear, hypocrisy, and reliance on human power structures. By refusing to give a direct answer, he asserts an authority that doesn't depend on their systems, permissions, or approvals. Jesus knows this, and they will shortly face a similar dilemma with him. So while they are arguing, Jesus walks free, for now at least. But as we know, and as we read later on in the Gospels, they continue to plot against him, ultimately leading to his death, arrest and death. We see here, as in many other times throughout the gospel stories, Jesus subverting the power of the day by not playing their game. Jesus once again promotes what we call today civil disobedience, or what others have termed holy mischief. That is, he deliberately breaks the laws of the state in order to question their moral foundations. It is a positive political act designed to show up the hypocrisy of those in power, who instead of using their power to serve the masses, they use their power for themselves and to suppress others for their own gain. We are again reminded that there are at least 25 recorded instances in the Gospels of Jesus having conflict with the Pharisees, and it's always around this issue. Jesus healing on the Sabbath, touching the unclean. Just some examples about Jesus creating holy mischief and breaking their laws. Even in the birth narratives of Jesus, which we are remembering right now through this current season of Advent, we had the Magi, the visitors from the East, who after seeing the baby Jesus, refused to follow the direct orders of Herod and tell and report back to him where the baby is. Instead, they go home a different way. Again, civil disobedience. It's about exposing the hypocrisy and hardness of heart of the Pharisees and contrasting that with Jesus and his response, which is out of compassion, love, and including the outsiders, those who are constantly marginalised by the powers. Church history is full of saints who have walked in the way of Jesus by creating holy mischief and standing against unjust laws and those in power to create change. Some popular examples are Martin Luther King, Oscar Romero, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Dorothy Day, just to name a few. A few years ago, I, along with some other Christian leaders in Melbourne, were arrested and escorted off the premises of one of our federal politicians' offices here. We were holding a 10-hour-long prayer meeting while sitting in the foyer of his office, while calling for an end to the immoral detention of asylum seeker children by our government. Yes, we were disrupting business as normal for the day in order to bring about some change. Our movement, called Love Makes a Way, was deeply inspired by Jesus' challenging of the unjust and immoral laws in place, like we have read today. The night before, I reread Martin Luther King's beautiful letter from Birmingham jail. If you haven't done it, I'd encourage you to read it, and I've left a link in the comments below. So what about us today? Do we, like the religious leaders of Jesus' time, cling to power, control, or tradition, questioning anyone who challenges our comfort zones? Or do we dare to embrace the disruptive authority of God, the one that flips tables, prioritizes people over rules, and calls us to a deeper truth beyond our neatly constructed systems? God's authority isn't bound by human constraints. It's wild, liberating, and unsettling, challenging us to choose courage over control, humility over pride, and truth over comfort. Will we too dare to question authority where it fails to reflect the justice, mercy, and love of God? Let us close our time today with a prayer that's traditionally called a Franciscan blessing. May God bless you with discomfort at easy answers, half-truths, and superficial relationships. Discomfort so that you may live deep within your heart. May God bless you with anger at injustice, oppression, and exploitation of people. Anger so that you may work for justice, freedom, and peace. May God bless you with tears to shed for those who suffer pain, rejection, hunger, and war. Tears so that you may reach out your hand to comfort them and turn their pain to joy. And may God bless you with enough foolishness to believe that you can make a difference in the world. Foolishness so that you can do what others claim cannot be done. Foolishness to bring justice and kindness to all our children and the poor and marginalised today. Amen. God bless you.